Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our quarterly Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion meeting. Tonight's meeting, we're going to focus on courageous conversations, and we are pleased to have our past District Governor, Nabil Odeh, with us, who's passionate about Rotary and our mission to serve and heal the world. Nabil has held a variety of leadership positions at all levels in Rotary International, from District Governor to Zone Institute General Chair, Rotary International Training Leader, and Support Leaders for 3 years. Rotary International President Representative for 3 years. Nabil is a frequent speaker and presenter at Rotary events around the globe, including visiting lecturer at the Rotary Peace Center in Bangkok, Thailand for 6 years. Nabil has been a champion of peace building and conflict resolution for over 30 years. In 2020, Nabil was recognized by receiving the Donald McRae Peace Award for outstanding achievement and contribution to building peace and international cooperation. And in 2022, Nabil was awarded Rotary International Highest Honor, Service Above Self Award. Professionally, Nabil is an accomplished author, president, and founder of the Center for Conflict Resolution International, and CEO for Versa Inc., a leadership development firm. So everyone, please welcome Nabil. And Nabil, it is all yours. We appreciate your coming tonight, and we look forward to your conversation.
Thank you so much. Good evening, one and all. It's great to be with you. And for this is really very important topic and something that we need to have some serious conversations about and on. And I think it is really important for us to have this type of discussion because one of the things that is becoming more and more evident in much of the work I've been doing with Rotary, that the issue around diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that is, for lack of a better term, and I'll use it, it's pushing some buttons, pro and con, in a sense, and creating some strife. But at the same time, I think it's something that is really critical for us to have serious conversations about. And you hope and wish, and as always, I do that. I have been working in this field for over 3 decades, and sometimes I say, it's hopefully we'll get to a day that we don't have to speak about it, but just live the experience, which is foundationally, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and I think we talk about a lot about making sure that we really work on helping people have a sense of belonging. And one of the things that I really advocate a lot for is really to talk about kind of embracing one another versus just simply to talk about kind of, it's check a box, but how do we become an embracing organization in all that we do, so that it is not something we're making a point of to say, oh, look at us, we are diverse. Oh, look at us, or we're doing this, or we have, but actually be that. And I think it's the reality of it. We are far from it, and I think it's really important. And this is one of those things that I think we need to have some really honest conversations, and that's become more and more evident as we talk about this. Because if we want to be seen as an organization that is genuinely inclusive, genuinely engaging with people, we have to actually not only have a policy and process, but the truth is we have to live it, we have to act it. We can't just simply kind of be what we call, and that's the biggest danger. We cannot and should not be what we call performative, just for the show that we have, oh, look at us. It's not about look at us. It's about really having and appreciating and engaging and involving the total lived experience of everybody who chooses to be part of Rotary, and in the service we provide to other people. So it's not only that it's critical for us internally, but it's critical for us externally as we model this and we engage the world around us. And I think somehow we should not be in a place of, for lack of a better term, of playing catch up. We need to be in a place of being seen as leaders, not again by chatter and talk, but just through actions. How do we actually run our clubs, how we engage our clubs, our districts, our zones, Rotary International, our institutions, our processes, how we engage with the people we serve, how we partner with people. I think, and it's not a narrow definition. We'll talk more about definitions in a minute and what does all these things mean. But I think it's really critical for us to kind of, in a sense, externally, we have to model to others what we preach, and not just simply kind of preach it, but not really model it. But at the same breath, the hardest thing for us as Rotarians is to admit that we actually have conflicts, that some of our policies, procedures, processes create conflict. Conflict inherently is not a bad thing, but is how we deal with it, how we address it. And that's what we have the topic of this evening, is having courageous conversations. Conflict is a reality of life. Conflict is whenever you have differing expectations, needs, wants, opinions, values, principles, whatever it is, you're going to have a conflict. So foundationally, it's not a problem. But I think for many of us, the minute something becomes conflictual, we tend to either suppress it, not talk about it, ignore it, or actually take what I would call very opposite and dysfunctional sides. And I think this is very critical for us to really work very hard and diligently about, to mitigate, minimize, and really find the appropriate and build really processes for us to have meaningful conversations with one another. Because fundamentally, and this is something, I mean, again, I don't want to be preachy about this when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll say this, I have found it very interesting. This is just experiential. So I haven't done major research in Rotary about this. I'm telling you from a person who gets invited to do different, for lack of a better term, interventions, really all around, with different challenges and issues that Rotary clubs, districts face when it comes to a variety of issues. And really one of them is DEI is one of the key elements. Is that part of it though is that there's a different elements to this, and a lot of it has to do with, you know, either people's sense of what understanding or what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean. But at the same time, if what I have found, and again, I really want to have a dialogue with you, and I want you to challenge me if you feel like I'm out in left field. But if you look at, if an individual Rotarian has spent so much time in engaging with Rotary at an international level or at even zone level, you can see and experience what I call difference. So many differences for people's, you know, from we're talking about, so diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't seem to be a foreign topic or something unusual or something that we have to stretch ourselves into. And if you go, especially like, you know, some of us have spent the last couple of weeks in Orlando with International Assembly, and I think you have the world that comes together with I mean, literally, like talk about the embodiment of everything we talk about in terms of, and you have no idea. You literally, other than this individual is a Rotarian and they're a leader, you have not a clue as to, in terms of their quote unquote, how they self-identify themselves, or how they, other than there's some optical stuff you may have, but the rest of it. And I met so many people that I literally, with an open mind and heart, and they talk about who they are and what they are and how they see themselves in the world. And the diversity is mind-boggling, honestly. But I think the challenge is to look at that and see how we can. So it should not be only at certain level of Rotary, but it should be at all levels of Rotary, at all the strata of Rotary, to say how we can embody this in whichever way that makes sense to the communities that we live in, and have that, and different, there's a different, for lack of a better term, emphasis in certain areas because of certain demographics, issues, and all of that. But at the end of the day, I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is really, it's a foundational issue that we need. And I think I really, for a person who's a talker, in a sense, I speak about these things a lot, but I do lots of interventions too. But I think it's how do we live it? And that's going to be really the challenge for all of us, not just how do we talk about it, but how do we actually experience it, how we live it, and how we support each other and deal with the issues, and accept the fact that we are going to have differences, conflicts, challenges when we deal with diversity and difference. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's something horrible. It's something to say, okay, that's in front of us. How do we deal with it? It's maybe challenging at times and sometimes very, very difficult. But I always say to people, we're doing this not because it's easy, because it's something that it needs to be done. And I think, but it really takes courage. But with courage we have to find, and what I found most challenging for many people, especially in leadership in Rotary, they haven't skilled themselves, kind of skilling up in a sense of understanding the different dynamics, understanding how to engage people in a structured, for lack of a better term, structured and constructive process. But we'll talk about those as well tonight and see what the different possibilities are. And I think that's going to be a key element for us, to have some honest and healthy conversation with one another about this. The reality of it is again, I want to give you a sense of this is actually not a made-up story. This is a real life scenario of a situation which will stay again. Maybe you'll see some elements you're thinking, oh, I've seen this or experienced it or I've heard of it or whatever. But it's something that I want to share with you what actually happened, and we talk about this, so the case study. And I think it's really important for us to have some sort of just to give you some background on it and how and what the different approaches possible, and we'll have some discussions together about that. As with everything, I've modified this, so hopefully, and I'm pretty confident that you may see elements in places you experience, but we have, always I say, I try to protect the guilty and the innocent. So we just haven't really, we change enough things in it just to make sure that people say, oh yeah, that's Nabil and that's Jim and that's Dan and that's whoever. I think we'll do that. But it's it's a mid-sized club in a really outgoing mid-sized town, but a club that has been very diligent at doing local projects, local fundraisers. Very much, they are community oriented. The vast majority of the club are people who have been in the club for quite a while, and very much, I would call them seasoned Rotarians, with few newer members that have actually have joined. But what has happened, before any quote unquote intervention happened, there has been kind of increasing tension in the club. People got very, a group of very opinionated people started expressing their discomfort, agitation, struggle with things, and things got a bit too tense, and it really centered around, here's the thing about diversity, equity, and inclusion. When we talk about this DEI, and here's the interesting part that made it very, very unique and interesting. You had one of the parties was the president-elect of the club, who actually believed you can, again, we'll have some, interesting discussion together, who believe that this DEI policy did not apply to the club, to his club. This is some sort of a nice thing to have, but really, we don't have to deal with it. And yet he was, so he went to PETS training, and at PETS he found out that, guess what? This is not a nice to have. This is pretty much an expectation, especially as a leader. It's not you should, there's no, Rotary police is gonna, do this. But at the same time, there's a real expectation of a leader to promote and engage people and make sure that the club has really has diverse, that follows, understands, engages with the whole idea of DEI, the whole thing of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so still he came back to the club and saying, you know what, here's the thing. That's what Rotary wants. But at the end of the day, I think our club should just take a stand, because as far as he's concerned, and a few people around him, that he's the word. Remember this is political interference. And it's something that there should not be, that Rotary should not be in the business of imposing those kind of quote unquote political views on the club. So, but they really, it's at the end of the day, we'll talk about the processes, but after some serious discussions with the clubs and having a real intervention, some choices were made, and I'll tell you about them later. But I think fundamentally the other people said, but here's the thing, other people felt that it's the whole sense that this club is getting older, this club is not really growing, and not only that, but this was very key. Some of the people were saying that it's not just not growing, it's not actually being as impactful as it used to be in the community. Very few people know about Rotary, very few people are engaged in things. They have a couple of things that they have done, they're very proud of, but that's it. They are, in a sense, and I'll say the word, they were kind of more of a stagnant. And they felt, unless we really seriously look at how we can be more diverse, how we can be more engaging, how we can actually be more welcoming of a variety of people in our community, it's like the club is gonna, in a matter of 5 to 7 years, will probably fold. So this is some of the challenges that people were facing, and part of it, leaders then, and that's the unfortunate part, things kind of brew and build up and build up and build up. The president of the club, the sitting president of the club, goes and talks to the assistant governor. The assistant governor tries to do some things, but again, not all, with all due respect, not all assistant governors have the skill sets to come and have a really facilitated discussion with something like this. So, again, but at the end of the day, it escalated to the governors, escalated to have the leadership group to come and really and to do an intervention. And one of the things that needing to have some sort of a solution or resolution to the situation, that it became really critical that people needed to have some level of resolution, something that they can feel there's a way out of this, because things were really it got to the point of being very, very, very tough, and some people felt unheard, they were not felt respected, they didn't feel like they were engaged, and some people, like lots of good Rotarians, they didn't want to get involved. They have their own opinions, but they don't want to get sucked into this whole schmozzle. So, but at the same time, it become really kind of demoralizing for a lot of people in the club on either side of the argument, for lack of a better term. But I think one of the things that it's really important to see and to look at what are possibilities here. What are some possible for addressing these kind of issues from your perspective as a Rotarian? Then if you're a committee chair, or if you're a president, or you are a PDG or a DG, whatever your position is. But I think as Rotarians, how do we come together to address those kind of issues in a way that will get some results? So I think Kate sent you a snippet of just simply the different approaches, the 4 approaches, and then has 4 questions under those questions for you to discuss in a small group. And then I think will be really good to have a discussion together about it, and just simply go through these different options that we have in front of you. I trust now. Let me see here. So Kate, are the facilitators available?
Yes, I think everyone's available. Ardith, Dan, Joe, and Sue. Sue, you're being volunteered to do a breakout session.
Okay, these names, Bruce needs to have them. So it's Ardith, Dan, Joe, and Sue.
Yeah, Sue Davidson, Dan Dougherty, Joe Small, and Ardith Paxton.
Okay, perfect.
And let me just make sure, Joe, I saw Joe. Yep, Joe Small. Yep, they're all on.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to to really look at in this with your facilitator. So one of the things that we're looking at possible interventions, for lack of a better term, that we want to have to discuss each of them and answer the 4 questions that your facilitators will have. And if not, I don't know, Kate, did you send it to people? I don't know how that worked out when we. Were the questions sent to people, or no? Just only the approaches.
Yeah, sorry, Nabil. I'll do that right now.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
perfect.
Bruce has them, but I will do it right. I'll send it to them right now.
Yeah, if you do, that'd be great, because I think it'd be good rather than just me reading them off and just for you to read them again and all of that. But I think it's a very much looking at each one of them, and the facilitator will work with you at looking at these approaches. And it's really important to explore each of the approaches, and really look in so many ways. Is it appropriate? And if it's not, or it is, under what circumstances, to look at how feasible that in your environment, to use these models to have these kind of conversations, and what are the opportunities in utilizing each of the approaches, and what are the challenges. So the possibilities, what can go really, really bad if we go in that direction, and what can possibly work really well.
Hey, do you want me to put those questions into the chat?
That'll be great, but I really want the facilitators to have them too. But it'll be good to have them in the chat, because and the approaches that they will have to, because they can share each of the approaches with each of the small groups, and then they can go through each of these questions. But so as many people who can access it, the better. I think but the facilitators can actually lead that part of the session.
Nabil, clarifying question: do you want them to have all 4, or is each facilitating any
No,
one?
all 4, because they're very straightforward. I think it's very good.
Okay, Susan, Ardith, Joe, and Dan. I just sent them to you.
Okay, perfect. So So again, each of these approaches, and you have to trust me when I tell you, they have been utilized and used. And I want you to think about, in your world, would these approaches work? And are they feasible? And not only for your own area, but it's what do you think the possible consequences of using those type of approaches in addressing issues of DEI in our clubs and in our districts? So if you take some, we'll give you half hour, and if you need more time, I'll go around and I'll check on people. But I think should, if we have this, because I think we'll have probably, let me look here. Yeah, you'll have around how many? That's eight to 9 people in each group, which is really good.
While we're waiting on Nabil, we can wait just one moment. Just overall, are there any comments about the breakout sessions? We'll go from group to group, but overall, did we have good discussion? I tried to hop around in there and, sorry. I had to hop around in each one of the areas, and it sounded like really good discussions going on. Group 1, which was Sue Davidson. Sue, do you want to go ahead and you and your group sort of give an overall on what you all discussed?
Well, I will go ahead. And we did have a good discussion, a very rich discussion. Talked a lot, and we did go through the 4 approaches, but of course it starts to come together after, a couple, and there's some almost, sort of immediate responses to some of the approaches, but I'll try and summarize. And I think, first of all, looking at it has to be done in such a way, all discussions, that there's buy-in. It has respecting the people who are involved in the discussion, the education, the awareness, the understanding, because if we don't have awareness or we don't have understanding, that's not going to begin. So there was a lot of talk about that. We felt approach number 1 was a little bit harsh, a little bit top down, but there was some merit in Rotarians understanding that we are part of a bigger organization. There are some Rotary expectations, understanding that there is a DEI policy. So there was merit in that, but it was how it was approached was a concern. I think number 2, and I don't remember, it doesn't really matter. Oh, if you don't do anything, nothing will change. And I mean, that we also had the discussion that in a lot of smaller clubs, depending on the area that they were in, that is exactly how it's handled. That people just kind of ignore it, that nothing much is done, and especially looking at DEI and other issues as well. So that had some of that discussion, and then talked a bit about, I guess really the number 4 was the one that we talked about the most in the facilitation. But we had discussion around how that facilitation would look and how we involve all of our club members in a facilitation and who would be that facilitator. Because facilitating a discussion such as this requires a lot of skill, and is having the language, is having the words to guide that discussion and to have a framework for that discussion. And often it's better if it's somebody that isn't either part of the club or well known to the club, because we all come with our own biases, we all come with our own ideas, we all come with a history. And so having somebody with very fresh eyes who can take a more neutral approach and who can really look at both sides of the conversation and help people come together and understand. So I think that, and anybody from the group, I mean, that is a very brief run through, but I'm sure we all had very similar discussions, so I don't want to take a lot of time. Anything from our group that I should add? Okay, so that was a brief overview, Kate, as facilitated discussion, but really looking at the skills of the facilitator, how the facilitator approaches it, the circumstance for it, the format, where it is, all of those things have to be very, very purposeful and very carefully thought out. Well, sorry, we also talked a lot about DEI committees, the role of DEI committees in district. We know it's all over the map, but how they can support clubs and but again, DEI committees needing skills in facilitation. So that was a lot of our discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you, Susan. No, that's very key. And I think it has to be purposeful. And I think you need somebody who has the capacity and the ability to facilitate those kind of difficult conversations. It's not just simply by virtue of somebody's position in the district to say, I am so and so and I can do that, but you need somebody with some skill sets. And we need to train lots of people in this regardless. I think it's a key, not only with DEI, to facilitate difficult discussions, because this is not the only place we need discussions in Rotary. So I think it's a key element. Thank you. Kate, by the way, I was listening to everybody, and for whatever reason, I was shut down completely. I had to get out and come back twice to come in. So
sorry about that.
No, it's worked out just fine. I think I just needed to.
So I didn't know if you wanted to jump back in, but I had asked Sue. I started with team 1. I was going to go on to team 2.
Sure, absolutely. Let's continue, and then.
Perfect. So, Dan, were you team 2 or was it Ardith?
I was.
And Ardith. Okay, Ardith, you want to give a report out?
Thank you. We had, just as Sue's group, we had some really interesting and rich discussions. Everybody remarked on the fact that our geographic differences made our discussions much richer, because when people started talking about situations that existed in their own home clubs, everybody could kind of nod, but give their own input about how it was just happening a little differently in their club. So on approach number 1, calling the special meeting with the entire club, people felt that, I guess it was positive in the sense that it was inclusive of everyone in the club, but that it was a dangerous approach in that you'd need to do some pre-work before a meeting like this, because it would just likely amplify the tensions that already existed within the club. And then telling people that if they don't get on the bandwagon, the club's charter is going to be revoked is kind of a heavy-handed approach to when you're trying to find a solution. So we went on to number 2, which people said that this often happens in some of their clubs, that people decide it's better not to make a big deal about the policy and just carry on the way they've always carried on. And there are no Rotary police, so nobody's liable to catch them at it. The issue is that, of course, when we're all facing issues of attracting new membership, if we don't pay attention to these kinds of issues within our clubs, we've got lots to worry about. And so this is not a good approach at all. Approach number 3 is to stay out of it. And this is putting on the blinders and sticking heads in the sand. And we know that doesn't work. We are all adults, and we do need to make decisions, but we need to make informed decisions and educated decisions. And everybody agreed that, Nabil, as you said in your opening remarks, many of us don't have the skills that are required to have these in-depth discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that it's really important in our involvement with the community and our club members that we live diversity, equity, and inclusion rather than talking about it. Then we looked at approach number 4 and felt that this was probably the best one and the one that was most likely to come up with a successful solution, and that it was maybe saving the club from implosion is kind of not a very good way of approaching it. But the fact that people felt that we could go to the club could go to the outside and find an expert in conflict management or intervention or whatever, rather than probably taking somebody within the club who may be seen to be on one side or the other of the discussion that was already taking place within the club. So, as I said, very rich discussions. We all learned a lot from one another. Anybody from my team who wants to add anything else, please feel free to do so.
We did have somebody skilled in this, though. Myrna in our group is a skilled facilitator. So her clubs are in good shape if they run into problems, which was wonderful to hear.
She's a skilled mediator, isn't she, Mike? So we were very fortunate to have her in our midst.
We have a lot of resources in Rotary. So, okay, the rest of you, Myrna's there. She's available. Anytime you would like some support, she'd be happy to help you. So, oh, look at it. We got the thumbs up. Perfect. Group number 3, I guess now.
That would be our group. I think that there was the richness of the discussion was amazing, and I'm not going to add a lot to what the first two groups did, but we really got onto the dialogue about, you know, even the meanings of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We talked and belonging, very important, and how we don't want to dilute one issue over another, but we be able to have those richness of discussions. And I thought that rather than me articulating this, I asked in the chat if Raj would comment for our group, because I think at the end she articulated very clearly. We talked about safe space, brave space, and those types of conversations. And Raj, could you maybe articulate how we pulled that together, or you pulled that together very well for us?
I think we all agree that the top-down approach is not good. And then through Danielle taught us about motivational interviewing so that the person actually feels you're in conversation with them. And we talked about conflict. And one of the that conflict was inherent, but I think, Dan, you want me to talk about that last part? It's been, we talk about having courageous conversations, but we don't explain what that is. And many people are afraid it's a conversation in which they're confronted by being called a racist or being called out on something. And how we ourselves have evolved from having safe conversations where we would bring in somebody marginalized who would share their pain with us. And then we were supposed to figure out how to deal with that. And I don't think there's any Rotarian who felt that they wanted to impose that. But from there, we moved into having this brave space in which the courageous conversations happen. And for people to understand that courageous conversation is more about understanding their own biases, their own implicit biases, the lenses through which they see this, understanding their own cultural competency and other people's cultural competency, helps everybody realize this is not somebody's going to train you in a certain way. You're going to open your own eyes to the situation. And I think that takes some of the tension out of the room. And to the point Dan made about when you start diluting it away from, from race and ethnic and cultural issues to talking about diversity in terms of accessibility and broader issues, it's for people to realize, oh, there's a lot more to this word diversity than just the difficult questions. But in doing so, we have to be careful not to lose the thrust of what DEI should accomplish for the marginalized communities, historically marginalized communities. And in my DEI community, that comes up a lot. We talk about getting people to belong to Rotary for all these other reasons, and then we somehow shift away from just plain out racial problems that we haven't addressed. And I am reminded of that by our DEI community, that once again, they're being left out.
Thanks so much for that. Now, group number 4. We need to start putting it together here rapidly.
Thank you, Nabil. We've covered much of the same discussions as the 3 previous groups. However, if I could just focus on parts of the discussions that really resonated, and I want to invite the members of that breakout session number 4 to, by all means, chime in as well if I've missed anything. We wanted to get race right out of the picture. So I've always held the fact that DEI is not about race. Race is present, but it's not necessarily always relevant, especially when we're having conversations about those who have disabilities, whether that's mobile challenges, visual challenges, hearing challenges, economic challenges, none of which has anything to do with race. We also, and I'm not sure who mentioned it, but I told them that I was going to steal it, IDEA, idea as opposed to DEA. It's all about really getting at the work, if you will. This is transformational work. We talked about some of the clubs, legacy clubs in particular, older, predominantly white male, who are just not going to change. And we have to accept that fact that they're going to age out, they're going to die out, DEI or DIE. But the reality is, some of those clubs are just not going to change. And therefore, we need to make and begin to build fertile ground to build a new club in their departure, so to speak. We also, interestingly enough, we've had a mix of both U.S. and Canadian members on our breakout session, and so we also spent a little bit of time just sort of comparing, what's the political landscape look like as it relates to the discussions of DEI, obviously hotly contested and disputed and discussed more so in the United States, but our Canadian counterparts certainly acknowledge that they too have their challenges. So it's not like it's a perfect state of addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let me stop there and just ask my members of that breakout session, is there something I missed? Is there something you want to add to those comments that I've made?
You got thumbs up. So that's
thank you.
Confirming that. Great. We have 5 minutes that I would like to just spend some time just going through a couple of things with you that I think it's first of all, thank you for the discussion. I think I was able to jump on a couple of the breakouts, and I think very rich discussion and very and I just love the spirit by which you guys got engaged with one another. I think it's, as you can see, it's not a simple issue. It's a complex one. At the same time, foundationally, we should not get stuck on acronyms and just terminology, but rather experiences. I started with that in the beginning. How do we live this? How do we interact with each other that way? How our policies and procedures as an organization invite this? I think it's really important to do that versus to have just a chatter about it. And I think the issue is there's a whole talk out there about is DEI, and I appreciate what Joe said. It's not about race. It's not about a specific area, and say it's about this. It's at the end of the day, we talk about belonging. We talk about inclusion. I always talk about embracing one another in a real, genuine, honest way, and not just simply, remember the whole talk we used to have, we have to have, tolerance. I tolerate disease. It's not about tolerating people. Tolerating, that's not a term. Embracing people, accepting of who they are, what their journey they're at. And I think the idea of saying we cannot add too much to it, it dilutes it. I think it expands it. We need to be expansionist about it and find those points of links and use people's lived experience when it comes to diversity. I just literally, before I came here, I was listening to somebody say 1 out of 5 talk about a barrier to joining Rotary. 1 out of people who identify as disabled are working. 4 out of 5 don't have jobs. And if you want to join Rotary with the expectation, the socioeconomic expectations of it, how are you going to join? So think of that. There's a way wider thing. It's not just about one or the other. We have a lot of issues here, but the issue, how do we show up in the world? That's always my family used to, how you show up in the world. And as Rotarians, we have to show up in the world in a certain way that is actually inviting, accepting, and embracing one another. And we have really, and I always tell people this, sometimes we say it, and I love some clubs actually repeat it every meeting, the four-way test. But it's interesting. The question that we need to ask ourselves, and I want to finish with this for the benefit of all of us. It's the whole sense of, is it the truth? The bottom line is, we cannot rely on hearsay, secondhand information, opinions masquerading as facts. We need to always search for the truth, the real truth. So the fact that people have opinions and make them into fact, no, let's have a discussion. Let's get to the bottom of this and not just simply talk at each other. As we look at address these type of issues, we need to ask, are our processes, our action behavior, are they fair to all concerned? Look at this. All concerned is whom? Is everybody. Is not saying people with this age or this gender or this persuasion. To all concerned. Let's wake up and say, this is what we're preaching to the world and to each other. That's what DEI is all about. How to be fair to all. Remember, it didn't say certain individual concerned, to all concerned. And is what I'm about to do or say is build goodwill and better friendship, or is going to escalate things and make things worse for people? On the margins, in the margins, on whatever side you're on. The thing is, that's what we do say, build goodwill. I challenge any Rotarians, if you want to talk about really genuinely be embracing and engaging and be welcoming and have an accepting diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, that we saying, whatever we say and do, think of this, say and do, bring goodwill, build goodwill and better friendship. And at the end of the day, is whatever solutions and understandings we come up with, are really going to be beneficial to everybody. So imagine you're serving a community and you're excluding certain segment of your community. That's what we're preaching to the world. That's what people join us for, because we share this four-way test, these values that we proclaim to the world. Come join us, because whoever is part of this organization genuinely understands, believes, and lives these values. Then the whole discussion about who we get let in and who don't let in and who we get is moot if we genuinely. Otherwise, with all due respect, and I've said that one time to Dan invited me to speak to a group of presidents, I think 10 years ago or 12 years ago in Calgary. And I said, then we're hypocrites and we're liars. That we don't follow the four-way test. We say we do, but we're not living it. So why preach it? Why? So let's be honest with one another. And we talk about processes and systems and all of that, but we have a foundational value to ask, and then we can have a dialogue from there. We have a foundation. We don't need to have books and treatises and policies upon policies with this. We need to start with that premise and talk about how can we be in our respective communities, in our respective club, and the people we engage with, be really ensure that we have diversity. We're reflective of our community. We have equity. We're saying equity, meaning treating people how they want to be treated, not sameness. You know what I mean? It's just equity, how people want to be, and inclusion. And are we including people? Not even being inclusive. Are we including people who need to be included, or are we have barriers to people coming in? Ask that simple question. Don't talk about, who we're having in or out. What about, I ask myself the question, is my club, I have children in their 30s, is my club, is open to having a 32-year-old person, young professional, come and join the club and fully participate in the club life? I challenge any club to say that. Are we really, how intentional are we about it? We talk about it, we preach about it, but what are we doing about it? So it's not just about talking about, we talk about generational things, about racial issues, about variety of diversity of abilities. And at the end of the day, I think it's found we have to come back to the basics. And I really want to finish talking to us about this, is we need always come back to the basics. And I remember I used to do lots of talks about this, and I said, there's all I ever needed to learn, I lived in kindergarten. Remember that book? I genuinely live it. Maybe I changed my age, and some people are younger who don't remember this book, but it's amazing to me. I love the one that simply say sorry when you're wrong. And I thought, gracious Lord, I've made a whole lifelong living with people who just don't have the capacity to say sorry when they're wrong and have lots of conflict. So we have to come and resolve it. It's as simple as that. Return things where you found them. It's just those type of things. And I look at that in Rotary, we have a strong foundation. Let's come back and reintroduce ourselves to our foundation and really start that conversation from there and build it up towards, DEI as a way of being, but start with that premise. How are we living those values we tell ourselves and the world about? Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Kate, it's yours.
Nabil, thank you first and foremost for attending tonight and providing your insights and taking us through that conversation. It was delightful. And to all of you who participated, I know it was an evening away from your family, so thank you for taking the time. So as we together as Rotarians, we can day by day try to figure this out and try to make it a little bit better, for those who would like to be Rotarians and not necessarily feel connected all the time with our organization. So I thank you all. We will send out more information as our committee gets going. We're going to provide more resources, and we will send out a next quarterly conversation. If you have any ideas or thoughts, please let us know. We'd love your feedback on how we could do things better, what we can do to reach you and to provide resources. We thank you. Have a great night. Be safe, everyone, and be careful in the winter weather.